The hall was silent when the door opened. Two applicants sat with their hands on their laps, eyes on the panel. The third chair, seat number 2, was still empty, a white paper tag with 2 taped to the backrest, like a small flag. Everyone had been waiting for Juliana Benson, the most qualified. The clock ticked. The chairman cleared his throat. Then the door opened wider and a girl in a torn gown stepped in, face wet with tears, hair rough and loose like she ran through the wind. I'm sorry, she said, voice shaking. My mother is dead. The room gasped. A woman at the back covered her mouth. One of the interviewers sat forward and burst out. What? What do you mean? And who is your mother? The girl hugged a brown envelope to her chest, like it was her only shield. My mother is Juliana Benson. She came for this job. Seat number 2 is her seat. She raised a paper with shaking fingers. She was knocked down last night. This is her death certificate. Please, I came to beg you. The chairman's pen fell from his hand and rolled across the table. In the back row, a man in a simple navy suit stood up slowly. He was the billionaire CEO, Kingsley Anderson, the owner of Kingstech. His eyes filled with tears as he looked at the empty seat, then at the girl who stood under the bright office lights like a broken bird that refused to fall. What is your name? Kingsley asked softly. Elliana, sir, she whispered. Elliana Adam. The hall held its breath. The brown envelope shook more. The tag with 2 fluttered in the air from the AC above, as if the chair itself was waiting for an answer. Hours earlier, the morning sun over Lagos had not yet burned away the night's cool breeze. Elliana walked behind the small crowd, leaving the cemetery. She held a faded scarf that belonged to her mother and pressed it to her face. The red sand on the grave was fresh. People were leaving in 2s and 3s. A pastor squeezed her hand and told her to have faith. The words felt light. The ground felt heavy. Her mother, Juliana, had promised that after this interview, life would change. We will not be poor forever, she had said the day before, laughing as she washed plates at their small window. If Kingstech gives me the job, you will go to university, Elliana. You will be a doctor. You will help people. You will help me. They had gone to a construction site to carry bricks, as they did on hard days. They came home late, tired and dusty. Juliana rushed out to buy a second-hand office dress for the interview. She didn't see the speeding car. Elliana had watched the light leave her mother's eyes under a street lamp. This morning, she held the brown envelope with the documents her mother had kept ready. Certificates, birth papers, reference letters. She also carried the new thing she never wanted, the death certificate. She wasn't sure what to do with grief. She only knew one thing. Seat number 2 must not remain empty like the new hole in the ground. She washed her face with cold water. She didn't have time to comb her hair or iron her dress. She walked. When her legs shook, she ran. When she reached the office gate, the guard frowned and almost stopped her because of her clothes. But grief pushed her voice out strong. Please, she said, I need to go in. It's for my mother. Her name is Juliana Benson. The guard looked at her eyes, stepped aside, and waved her through. Inside the hall, the interview had dragged on. The panel finished with the second applicant. The chairman called, Juliana Benson? There was no answer. He sighed and called again. The AC hummed. Papers rustled. Then the door opened, and Elliana stepped in. I'm sorry. My mother is dead. The shock moved through the room like a sudden wind. One interviewer adjusted his glasses. A woman beside him reached for a tissue. The CEO, Kingsley, came forward, his voice careful, like he was reaching out with both hands. Come, my child. Sit here. He pulled out the chair that had waited all morning and guided her to it. The 2 tag tilted and dropped to the floor like a leaf. Elliana didn't sit. She held the envelope tighter. Sir, I came to beg, she said, looking from face to face. My father died when I was little. My mother raised me alone. We worked at a site yesterday because she had no money for interview clothes. She went to buy a dress. She didn't look. The car. Her voice broke. She was buried this morning. She promised to send me to university if she got this job. Please, if you can't give her the job anymore, give me anything, even cleaning so I can save and study medicine. I want to help people like her. I want to help Lagos like she wanted. A tear rolled down the chairman's cheek. The panel looked at Kingsley. He looked at Elliana's hands. They were rough, cracked by hard work, holding the dreams of a woman who now slept under red sand. He thought of his own life, his big house, his quiet car, his full table, and he felt small. "Elliana," he said, voice steady now. "From today, you are my daughter." Murmurs filled the hall. One of the applicants lowered his eyes. The woman with the tissue began to cry openly. "You will not be a cleaner," Kingsley continued. "You will study medicine. Kingstech will sponsor you. Your mother is part of our story now, and we will honor her." Elliana's mouth trembled. The envelope fell to her side. She knelt and gripped the edge of Kingsley's suit with both hands. "Thank you, sir. Thank you," she said, tears dropping on the polished floor. Kingsley didn't care about the dust on her gown. He bent and lifted her to her feet, then hugged her like a father hugs a child he didn't know he had. "You're safe," he whispered. "You're safe with me." He turned and called out, "Sam!" A tall driver in a neat uniform hurried in. "Yes, sir." "Take her to the salon," Kingsley said. "Let them wash her hair, trim the ends, and make her feel new. Then go to the boutique down the street. Buy her what she chooses. Not one dress. Enough to start again. We will wait." Sam nodded. "Right away, sir." Elliana looked at the panel, then at the empty chair. "Seat number 2, she said softly, almost to herself. "Thank you for waiting." The city moved fast, but the hours that followed moved like a gentle river. At the salon, warm water ran through Elliana's hair. A woman with kind eyes combed slowly, talking softly about endings and beginnings. At the boutique, they measured her, laughed with her, brought out fabric that caught the light. Elliana chose a simple gold gown that made her skin glow. She chose flat shoes because her feet were tired of running. When she looked in the mirror, she saw a girl her mother would be proud of. Sam smiled. "Madam will not know you again, and Sir will be happy." Back at Kingstech, the lobby lights felt warmer. When the elevator doors opened to the executive floor, staff turned to look and smiled like they were greeting sunshine after rain. Elliana held the brown envelope close, even though it was no longer her only shield. She stepped into the hall where the day had broken and mended. Kingsley stood waiting with the panel and some managers. He blinked, surprised at how different she looked. It wasn't the dress. It was the strength on her face. She walked straight to him, set the envelope on the table, and went on her knees again. "Thank you, Daddy," she said. The new word felt strange, but right. "I will not fail you." Kingsley swallowed hard and raised her up once more. "You already honored us," he said. "Your mother would be proud." He turned to the room. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is Elliana Anderson, my daughter." The staff clapped. Some cried again. The hall felt like a church without walls. That evening, the sky over Lagos turned gold and pink. Kingsley's house glowed with warm lights. When they entered, the air smelled like stew and fresh flowers. A tall woman in an elegant dress walked down the stairs with a smile that did not reach her eyes. "Welcome," she said, voice smooth. "I am Evelyn, Kingsley's wife." She looked Elliana up and down, lingering on the gold gown. The small new bag, the soft hair, her smile sharpened. "So this is the daughter you brought home today?" Kingsley slipped an arm around Elliana's shoulder. "Yes," he said gently. "This is Elliana." Evelyn's face softened for a second, then closed like a door. "You must be tired," she said. "Sam, please show her to the guest room." "Thank you, Ma," Elliana said with a small bow. She followed Sam, clutching her envelope again. When they were out of sight, Evelyn stood in the center of the living room and stared at the staircase a long time. Her hands were still, but her jaw was tight. She walked to the big window and looked out into the falling light, her reflection glassy and hard. Her phone buzzed. She picked it up without looking at the name and pressed it to her ear. The voice on the other end was low and quick. Evelyn's eyes narrowed. She watched the hallway where Elliana had disappeared. Her painted nails tapped the glass. "Call me later tonight," she whispered, turning away from the window so no one could read her lips. "I need advice." The line crackled with a soft laugh. Evelyn ended the call, smoothed her dress, and pasted the sweet smile back on her face as footsteps sounded on the stairs. And just as Elliana stepped back into the living room to say goodnight, Evelyn's phone lit up again. This time with a message that made her lips curve into a plan. The next morning, sunlight spilled through the glass walls of Kingsley Anderson's mansion. Inside, Elliana woke up in a soft bed for the first time in her life. The sheets were clean, white, and smelled like lavender. For a moment, she thought she was dreaming. She turned her head and saw a new blue dress neatly folded beside her bed, along with a note in elegant handwriting. "Breakfast is downstairs. Evelyn." The handwriting was beautiful, but the message felt cold. Still, Elliana smiled faintly, folded her mother's scarf, and pressed it to her chest before getting out of bed. When she entered the dining hall, she stopped. The room was massive, with chandeliers glittering like stars, and gold-rimmed plates lined on the long marble table. Kingsley was seated at the far end, reading a newspaper. His suit jacket hung on the chair beside him. Evelyn sat next to him, her back straight, her face calm but distant. "Good morning, Daddy," Elliana greeted softly. Kingsley looked up, his smile warm and genuine. "Good morning, my dear. Come, sit with us." Evelyn's eyes flicked to Elliana's face. "You must have slept well," she said, her tone polite but cool. "Yes, Ma. Thank you." Elliana smiled, unaware of the storm beneath those calm eyes. Kingsley folded his paper. "Evelyn, can you believe she reminds me so much of Juliana? The same strength, the same courage." Evelyn's fork froze mid-air. "Juliana?" she asked lightly. "Yes," Kingsley replied. "Her late mother, the woman who applied for the job." He sighed, shaking his head. "She must have been a great woman." Evelyn nodded, but said nothing more. She simply stared at Elliana, who was now quietly eating her breakfast, eyes lowered, full of gratitude. In Evelyn's mind, however, gratitude wasn't what she saw. She saw danger. That afternoon, Kingsley called Elliana to his office at Kingstech headquarters. She wore a plain sky-blue dress and polished black shoes Sam had helped her buy. When she entered, Kingsley was on a video call with a group of investors. His voice was confident, commanding, the voice of a man used to being listened to. He noticed her waiting quietly by the door and smiled before ending the call. "Elliana, come in." She stepped closer. "You called for me, sir?" Kingsley chuckled. "It's Dad, remember?" Elliana blushed and nodded shyly. "Yes, Daddy." He handed her a document folder. "These are the forms for the scholarship program I promised. You'll be applying to the University of Nigeria, in Nsukka. I already spoke to a friend at the admissions board. They'll help you get in." Elliana froze. "To study medicine?" He nodded. "Yes, my dear." "To fulfill your mother's dream." Tears filled her eyes. She hugged him before she could stop herself. "Thank you, Daddy. I'll never forget this. I promise I'll make you proud." Kingsley smiled and patted her back gently. "You already have." At home, Evelyn stood by the window again, watching as the gate opened to let Kingsley's car in. She saw Elliana step out, laughing beside him, holding her brown envelope. Kingsley touched her shoulder as they walked toward the house, both smiling. That image burned Evelyn's heart like fire. She turned and picked up her phone again. "Monica," she said sharply when the call connected. "You saw what I told you? She's getting closer to him every day. He calls her daughter, but the way he looks at her." Evelyn's voice cracked. "Evelyn," Monica's sly voice replied, "you're letting fear control you. Men don't take in strange girls without a reason. She's young, beautiful, and grateful. Be careful, that's how it starts." Evelyn bit her lip. "But she's like a child." "Child or not," Monica cut in. "You better act before she takes everything from you." Evelyn's fingers tightened around her phone. "What should I do?" Monica's reply was smooth and poisonous. "Start by watching her. Trust no one. Even angels can have hidden plans." Evelyn ended the call and stared at her reflection in the glass. Her makeup couldn't hide the jealousy forming like a shadow in her eyes. Weeks passed. Elliana grew more confident. She started taking short online classes, preparing for her university life. Everyone at Kingstech adored her kindness. She often helped the cleaners arrange the reception flowers or carried files for the secretaries, even though she was told not to. "Ma," one cleaner said one morning, "God bless you. You're not like the rich people here." Elliana smiled. "I'm not rich," she replied. "I'm just lucky someone believed in me." Evelyn overheard that from a distance. The words twisted her heart again. Later that evening, at dinner, Kingsley proudly said, "Evelyn, the board approved Elliana's scholarship. She'll resume in 2 weeks." Evelyn froze mid-bite. 2 weeks? Yes. Isn't that wonderful? Very, she said flatly, pushing her food around her plate. Elliana looked at her nervously. I'll make you proud too, Ma. I promise. Evelyn forced a smile. Of course, dear. I'm happy for you. Kingsley reached for his wife's hand, unaware of the tension under her smile. You'll see, Evelyn. This girl will change lives one day. That night, Evelyn couldn't sleep. She walked back and forth in her room, her mind racing. Every sound from Elliana's room irritated her. The laughter. The small voice on the phone, talking to her new friends. The way Kingsley now spent more time asking about her studies than about Evelyn's charity events. By midnight, Evelyn opened her bedside drawer and took out a small silver bottle Monica had given her weeks ago. A few drops, Monica had said, just enough to make her sleep forever. Evelyn's hands shook as she held it. No, she whispered. I'm not a killer. But then she remembered Kingsley's laughter downstairs that afternoon, the way he had hugged Elliana. A bitter tear rolled down her cheek. If I lose him, I lose everything. The next morning was Eliana's last day before traveling to Nsukka for school. The mansion was quiet, except for the sound of birds outside. Evelyn knocked on Eliana's door, smiling sweetly. Come in, Ma, Elliana called cheerfully. Evelyn entered, carrying a tray of jollof rice and fried chicken. I made this myself, she said softly. A farewell meal for my daughter. Eliana's eyes widened. Really? Thank you, Ma. You didn't have to. Hush, Evelyn said kindly, setting the tray down. Eat, my dear. You've been so busy packing. You need strength for your journey tomorrow. Elliana hugged her briefly before sitting down. She didn't notice Evelyn's trembling fingers as she walked to the door. Minutes later, the poison worked its way silently. Eliana's stomach twisted. She clutched her chest, gasping. The room blurred. She tried to scream, but her voice broke into dry sobs. She fell from the bed, hitting the cold floor, her body shaking. Help! Help! She whispered. From the hallway, Evelyn froze when she heard the sound. Then she smiled, a small cold smile, and quietly walked away. Eliana's vision dimmed. She tried to crawl toward the door, but her hands were weak. She thought of her mother, of Kingsley's words, of her dream to become a doctor. Mommy, help me, she murmured, as tears mixed with foam around her mouth. Downstairs, Kingsley's car pulled into the compound earlier than expected. He had returned from a meeting he cancelled halfway because he missed his daughter's smile. Sam, park fast, he said, stepping out quickly. As he entered the mansion, he heard it, the faint, broken cry from upstairs. Help! Daddy! Kingsley's heart stopped. Elliana! He raced up the stairs, burst through her door, and saw her on the floor, her hands shaking, eyes wide with fear. Elliana! Oh God, Elliana! He shouted, lifting her in his arms. Her lips trembled. Daddy, my stomach. It burns. Kingsley turned to the door and screamed, Sam! Start the car now! He carried her down the stairs as Evelyn stood frozen at the corner, her hands gripping the wall. Kingsley, what happened? She asked weakly, but he didn't answer. He ran past her, eyes filled with terror, holding the dying girl who had called him Daddy. The sound of the car tires screeching out of the compound filled the air. Evelyn stood in silence, her heart pounding. Then, slowly, a tear slipped down her cheek, the kind that burns not from pain, but from guilt. She whispered, What have I done? The hospital lights glared white and cold. Nurses rushed through the hallways, their shoes squeaking on the polished floor. Kingsley Anderson sat outside the emergency room, his hands shaking, his eyes red from crying. The clock on the wall ticked louder than his heartbeat. Inside the emergency room, doctors surrounded Elliana. Tubes ran from her nose and arm. The heart monitor beeped erratically. Her lips were pale, her breathing shallow. Every time the machine made a sound, Kingsley flinched. Sir, the nurse said, stepping out briefly. Please calm down. We're doing our best. She's fighting. Kingsley's voice trembled. What happened to her? She was fine this morning. She was packing for school. The nurse looked at him with pity, but didn't answer. Please wait here, sir. She disappeared back into the room, leaving Kingsley alone with his thoughts and his fear. He ran his hands through his hair, muttering, Please, God, don't take her too. Not her. He thought of Juliana, the woman whose courage had moved him to tears. He thought of how Elliana had entered that interview room, barefoot, broken yet brave. She had become the daughter he never had. He couldn't lose her now. Then, the sound of rushing footsteps pulled him from his thoughts. Evelyn arrived, wrapped in a blue shawl, her makeup smudged. "Kingsley!" she cried, pretending to gasp for air. "What happened? Is she okay?" Kingsley glared at her with eyes full of confusion and anger. "You tell me, Evelyn. You were at home with her. What happened?" Evelyn clutched her chest, feigning shock. "I don't know. I just went to check her room, and she was fine. Maybe she ate something outside." Kingsley stared at her long and hard, his jaw tight. "Elliana didn't go out today." The nurse came out again, holding a clipboard. "Sir, she's stable for now, but we need to operate immediately. The toxins are spreading fast. We must act or do whatever it takes," Kingsley said quickly. "Money is not a problem. Just save her." The nurse nodded and ran back in. Evelyn pretended to cry, wiping fake tears with her shawl. But her hands were shaking, not from sorrow, but from fear. What if they found out what she had done? 2 hours passed, then 3. Kingsley refused to sit. He stood near the window, watching the sky darken outside, praying under his breath. At exactly 9:17 p.m., the surgeon came out. He looked exhausted. "Mr. Anderson," he said quietly, "we've done our best. She's alive, but the poison damaged her uterus. She won't be able to bear children again." Kingsley's face fell. He covered his mouth with his hand. Tears rolled down his cheeks. "No, no." The doctor continued gently, "We'll monitor her overnight. If she survives the next 24 hours, she'll recover fully, except for the fertility issue." Kingsley nodded weakly. "Thank you, doctor. Thank you for saving her life." When the doctor left, Kingsley turned toward Evelyn. She was pale, her lips trembling. "She can't have children again," Kingsley whispered. "Who would do this to her? Who?" Evelyn's eyes darted away. It must have been something she ate." But Kingsley wasn't listening. He looked down the hall at the nurse's station. "Evelyn," he said coldly, "I want the house security footage for Tuesday. Every corner, every camera." Her body stiffened. "Why?" "Because I won't rest until I know what happened." Evelyn opened her mouth, but no sound came out. That night, Kingsley didn't leave the hospital. He sat beside Elliana's bed, watching her chest rise and fall slowly under the oxygen mask. The smell of disinfectant filled the room. Machines beeped softly. He took her cold hand into his and whispered, "You're my daughter. You're strong. You'll make it." For the first time in years, Kingsley prayed, truly prayed. The next morning, back at the mansion, Kingsley's head of security, Mr. Duke, sat before the living room television, rewinding the footage. Evelyn wasn't home. She had gone to church early, pretending to pray for Elliana. Duke sipped his coffee as he watched the video from Tuesday afternoon. At 7:13 p.m., the footage showed Evelyn entering the kitchen. She checked the hallway twice, then took a small bottle from her purse. She poured a few drops into a bowl of jollof rice and stirred it carefully. Then she carried the tray upstairs. Duke's eyes widened. He paused the video and immediately called Kingsley. "Sir, you need to see this." Kingsley returned home that afternoon, exhausted and grim. When Duke played the footage for him, the room went silent, except for the faint sound of Evelyn's laughter on the recording. For a full minute, Kingsley didn't move, his eyes fixed on the screen. His breathing slowed. Then, he whispered, "No, it can't be." But it was her, his wife, the woman he had trusted. His legs weakened, and he sank into a chair, burying his face in his hands. "She poisoned her," he murmured. "She poisoned my daughter." Duke's voice was low but firm. "Sir, should we call the police?" Kingsley looked up, his eyes cold now. "Yes, right now." By the time Evelyn returned home from her church prayer, 2 police vans were already parked in front of the mansion. She froze at the gate. "What's happening?" "Mrs. Anderson," an officer said, stepping forward. "You're under arrest for attempted murder." Her purse dropped to the ground. "What? No! There must be a mistake." "Tell that to the court," the officer replied, handcuffing her wrists. As they dragged her toward the car, she screamed, "Kingsley! Kingsley, tell them! I didn't do anything." Kingsley stepped out from the doorway, his face hard as stone. "I saw the footage, Evelyn." She stopped, struggling. Her tears came fast. "Please, I didn't mean to. I was afraid. She was taking you from me." Kingsley shook his head slowly. You tried to kill an innocent girl. The girl who called you mommy. Evelyn's sobs echoed across the compound. Kingsley, please. I did it for love. But Kingsley turned away. Love doesn't kill. The police car door slammed shut. As it drove away, Kingsley's heart broke all over again. 3 days later, Elliana finally opened her eyes. Her body felt weak, her throat dry. The first thing she saw was Kingsley sitting beside her bed, his head resting in his palms. Daddy, she whispered faintly. His head shot up. Elliana, my child. He gripped her hand, tears running down his cheeks. You're awake. Thank God. She tried to smile but winced from the pain. Where's Mommy Evelyn? Kingsley froze. The question stabbed him deeper than any knife. He looked away. She's gone for now, my dear. Elliana blinked, confused. Gone? He forced a smile through his tears. Rest now. We'll talk later. You're safe. But that night, after she drifted back to sleep, Kingsley sat by the window, watching the rain fall against the glass. The house was quiet. His heart wasn't. He thought of the irony, how a stranger had become his daughter, and how the woman he married had become a stranger. Outside, lightning flashed across the sky. He whispered into the silence, Juliana, I failed to protect your daughter, but I swear I'll make it right. Then his phone buzzed. A message from the police. Suspect Evelyn Anderson has been charged with attempted murder. Court hearing scheduled for Monday. Kingsley stared at the message until the words blurred. Then he looked at Elliana, sleeping peacefully, unaware of the storm that had just destroyed the world she had barely begun to build. He reached for her hand again and held it tightly, whispering, Sleep well, my daughter. You survived death. Now you must survive the truth. The morning sun over Lagos was unusually pale. The court compound was packed. Journalists, photographers, and onlookers crowded the steps, whispering and stretching necks to catch a glimpse of the woman at the center of the scandal that shook King's Tech Industries. Evelyn Anderson, the billionaire's wife, was led into the courtroom in handcuffs. Her once elegant blue lace gown was replaced with a faded prison uniform. Her face, once proud and flawless, now carried deep lines of regret and sleepless nights. But her eyes, those sharp, cunning eyes, still darted around the room, searching for sympathy. She found none. Across the aisle sat Kingsley Anderson, his face pale and exhausted. Beside him, Elliana, still weak from her recovery, wore a simple white gown and a headscarf. Her hands trembled in her lap. It had only been 3 weeks since the poison incident, and though her body had healed, her heart was still learning how to beat again. The courtroom air was thick with tension when the judge, an elderly man with calm but piercing eyes, entered. Court is now in session. Everyone rose. When the judge sat, the prosecutor began. Your lordship, this is a case of attempted murder, the poisoning of one Elliana Adam, an orphan under the guardianship of her adoptive father, Mr. Kingsley Anderson, by the defendant, Mrs. Evelyn Anderson. A ripple went through the crowd. Evelyn swallowed hard, blinking fast. The prosecutor continued, pacing slowly before the judge's bench. The evidence is clear. Security footage from the Anderson residence shows Mrs. Evelyn Anderson mixing a poisonous substance into a meal served to the victim on the day before her university departure. He paused, lifting a printed frame from the video footage. Evelyn, holding the silver bottle, her face half lit by the kitchen light. Gasps filled the room. Evelyn's lawyer jumped up. Objection, my lord. That image does not prove intent. My client was emotional, confused, and manipulated by external voices. She was not in her right state of mind. Overruled, the judge said calmly. Proceed. The prosecutor nodded and turned toward Elliana. Miss Adam, please come forward. Elliana stood slowly. Her legs felt like paper. Every step to the witness box felt like a journey through her mother's grave again. She looked at Evelyn, the woman who had smiled at her, hugged her, and later tried to end her life. State your name, the clerk said. Elliana Adam, she replied softly. Miss Adam, the prosecutor said gently. Can you tell the court, in your own words, what happened that day? Elliana took a shaky breath. It was the day before I was to travel to school. Mummy Evelyn came into my room. She brought me food, jollof rice and chicken. She said she made it herself. Evelyn lowered her head, tears dripping silently. Elliana continued, her voice trembling. I ate a few spoons. Then my stomach started to hurt. I couldn't breathe. I fell. I screamed for help, but no one came. I thought I was dying. The courtroom was silent. Even the reporters lowered their cameras. The prosecutor stepped closer. When you woke up in the hospital, what did the doctors tell you? They said, the food was poisoned, Elliana whispered, tears sliding down her cheeks. And they said I can never have a child again. At those words, Kingsley's head dropped. The entire courtroom gasped in pain. A woman in the back row began to cry softly. The prosecutor turned to the judge. Your lordship, this young woman lost not only her health, but her future as a mother, because of the defendant's cruelty. Evelyn's lawyer quickly stood. My lord, my client wishes to speak. The judge nodded. Proceed. Evelyn stood, hands trembling. She turned to the courtroom, her voice cracked. I'm guilty of being jealous, but not of being evil. Her eyes met Elliana's. You came into my home and everything changed. My husband smiled again, but not at me. You took his attention. You took my peace. I was blinded by fear. I thought you'd replace me. Her voice broke completely now. I didn't mean to kill you, Elliana. I just wanted you gone. I wanted my husband back. She fell to her knees, sobbing. Please, forgive me. I've lost everything already. The courtroom murmured again. Some pitied her. Some didn't. The judge lifted his gavel. Silence in the court. Then he looked at Evelyn for a long, heavy moment before speaking. Mrs. Anderson, jealousy is not a crime, but attempted murder is. You planned to poison a young woman who saw you as a mother. For that, you will serve 20 years in prison. The gavel struck. Case closed. Evelyn screamed as the officers pulled her up. No, please, Kingsley, tell them, I'm your wife. You loved me. Kingsley stood slowly. His face was stone. I loved you, he said quietly. But love doesn't destroy what it fears. Evelyn's sobs echoed as they dragged her out of the courtroom, the handcuffs glinting under the lights. Elliana stood frozen, staring as the woman she once called Mommy was taken away. Her heart ached, not from hate, but from pity. Why, Mommy? She whispered to herself. Why did you try to kill me? Weeks later, the world moved on. Newspapers carried the headline, Billionaire's wife sentenced for attempted murder of Orphan. Kingstech resumed normal operations, though Kingsley's laughter never returned as freely as before. Elliana, still weak, spent most days reading and preparing for her deferred university admission. One afternoon, she found Kingsley sitting alone in the garden, staring at the sunset. His face looked older, tired. Daddy, she said softly, walking up to him. You haven't eaten all day. He smiled faintly. I'm not hungry, my child. I was just thinking. Elliana sat beside him. About her? He nodded. Evelyn wasn't always like this. She used to be kind, gentle, but fear can turn love into poison. Elliana looked down at her hands. Do you hate her? Kingsley turned to her. No, hate doesn't heal anything. I pity her, but I also learned something. Even the people we trust most can become strangers when their hearts grow cold. Elliana nodded slowly, tears filling her eyes. I still wish she didn't do it. Kingsley reached over and touched her shoulder. You have a heart too good for this world, Elliana. Don't lose it. They sat in silence for a long time, watching the last golden light fade behind the trees. That night, when Elliana went to bed, she dreamt of her mother again. Juliana standing under a tree, smiling, her arms open wide. Forgive my child, she whispered in the dream. That's how you stay free. When Elliana woke up, her pillow was wet with tears. Months later, she finally resumed school. The University of Nigeria campus buzzed with life, laughter, music, and the chatter of young students dreaming big. But Elliana was different. She wasn't there just to study. She was there to fulfill a promise. She studied day and night, often falling asleep on her books. Professors admired her dedication. Her classmates respected her kindness. Sometimes she visited the hospital that saved her life, volunteering to help patients, even cleaning wards when nurses were short-staffed. She told herself, if I can save even one life, I'll heal a little more of my own. But deep down, she still carried the scar of her loss, the inability to become a mother. Yet, what she didn't know was that fate wasn't done with her story, because one morning, 5 years later, as she walked into the hospital, where she now worked as Dr. Elliana Anderson, She received a call that would change everything. It was from the prison warden. "Doctor," the voice said solemnly, "Mrs. Evelyn Anderson attempted suicide last night. She's in critical condition. They're transferring her to your hospital right now." Elliana froze. The phone slipped slightly in her hand. The world around her seemed to go silent. Her heart pounded as the warden continued. "She asked for you by name before she collapsed." Elliana took a deep breath and whispered, "Bring her. I'll be ready." Outside the window, rain began to fall. The rain poured heavily over Lagos that night, washing the streets in silver streaks of reflection. Inside Lagos University Teaching Hospital, the emergency ward buzzed with chaos, doctors rushing, nurses calling out, the echo of running footsteps filling the air. At the center of it all stood Time's Dr. Elliana Anderson, now 23, calm yet fierce in her white coat. Her hair was neatly tied back, her ID card swinging as she moved. No one would have guessed that 5 years ago, she was the same orphan girl who had walked into an interview room with tears in her eyes. But destiny has a way of circling back. A nurse ran up to her. "Doctor, the prison ambulance just arrived. It's a high-priority patient, female, late 40s. Possible poisoning." Elliana froze for half a second. Her hands tightened around her clipboard. "Name of the patient?" she asked, though her voice trembled slightly. The nurse checked the file. "Evelyn Anderson." The world around Elliana went quiet. The sound of rain faded. She stood still, heart pounding, breath shallow. The nurse touched her arm. "Doctor, should I assign someone else?" Elliana blinked away the fog in her eyes and steadied herself. "No," she said softly. "Prepare the operating room. I'll handle it." Minutes later, the doors burst open as 2 warders wheeled in Evelyn. Her prison uniform was torn, her face pale and sweaty. Foam clung to her lips, and her eyes rolled weakly in their sockets. The metallic smell of poison filled the air. "Overdose on cyanide," shouted one of the emergency nurses. "Her pulse is weak." Elliana put on her gloves. "Administer oxygen. Start saline. Get me the antidote kit, now." Her voice was steady, but inside, her heart was breaking. She looked down at the woman lying before her. The same woman who once poisoned her. The same woman who called her daughter. One moment and evil the next. Now Evelyn was helpless. Small, fragile. "Stay with me," Elliana whispered under her breath as she worked quickly, inserting the IV, monitoring her heart rate. "You're not dying tonight." The nurses looked at her in surprise. They could hear the emotion behind her words. After hours of surgery, Evelyn was moved to the recovery ward. The poison had caused severe internal bleeding, but Elliana's team fought hard and won. By dawn, Evelyn's heartbeat had steadied. The storm outside had calmed too. When Evelyn opened her eyes, she saw blinding white lights. Her throat was dry. She tried to move but realized she couldn't. Her wrists were strapped lightly for her safety. Then she heard footsteps, slow and familiar. Elliana stepped into the room, still in her scrubs. Her face was calm, but her eyes were heavy with emotion. Evelyn's lips trembled. "Elliana, is that you?" "Yes," Elliana said softly. "You're safe now." Evelyn turned her face away, ashamed. Tears gathered in her eyes. Why did you save me?" she whispered. "After what I did to you, you should have let me die." Elliana walked closer, stopping beside her bed. "Because I'm a doctor," she said gently. "And because I remember what my mother taught me. Forgiveness heals faster than revenge." Evelyn began to sob, her shoulders shaking. "I destroyed your life. You can never have children because of me." Elliana's voice cracked slightly, but she kept it steady. "You didn't destroy my life. You gave me a story, one that taught me compassion. You took something from me, but God replaced it with something greater. I can now save lives, including yours." Evelyn cried harder, her voice weak. "I don't deserve your mercy." Elliana reached out and gently wiped the tears from her cheek. "Then live long enough to become the kind of person who does." At that moment, the door opened, and Kingsley Anderson entered. His hair had grayed slightly, his eyes filled with both relief and pain. He stopped short when he saw them, the 2 women who had changed his world, side by side. "Evelyn," he whispered. Evelyn looked away, ashamed. "Kingsley, I don't expect forgiveness. I poisoned our home with hate." Kingsley's voice broke. "Yes, you did. But I also failed you. I didn't see your fear. I didn't heal your heart when I should have." He took a deep breath. I'm not here to punish you. I'm here because Elliana asked me to be. Evelyn turned to Elliana, tears flooding her eyes again. After everything I did, you still want him to forgive me? Elliana nodded slowly. Because forgiveness frees all of us, Mommy. That word, Mommy, broke Evelyn completely. She cried so hard that her weak body shook. I don't deserve that name, she choked out. Elliana held her hand tightly. You're still human. And humans make mistakes. But they also change. Kingsley stepped closer. Evelyn, I withdrew the case against you. You'll be released early on medical grounds, but you must promise to start over. Evelyn stared at him in disbelief. You forgave me? Kingsley's eyes softened. Elliana reminded me that love isn't meant to punish. It's meant to heal. The three of them sat in silence for a while, the air heavy but peaceful. Outside, the morning sun broke through the clouds for the first time in days. Months passed. Evelyn moved back home under supervision, frail but alive. The mansion that once echoed with tension was now filled with quiet gratitude. Elliana continued her work at the hospital, quickly becoming one of the most respected young doctors in Lagos. Her story spread across the city, the orphan who forgave her poisoner, who rose from tragedy to become a healer. People began calling her the miracle doctor. Then, one Saturday morning, life surprised them again. Kingsley stood in the living room, holding an envelope with trembling hands. Elliana, he called out. She came down the stairs, smiling in her pink hospital gown. Yes, Daddy? He handed her the letter. It came this morning, from the University of Geneva. Elliana tore it open, her heart racing. Then she gasped. Daddy, they've accepted me, she cried. They want me for a research fellowship in advanced medicine. Kingsley's eyes filled with tears. You've made your mother proud, my child. Evelyn, who had been sitting quietly in a wheelchair nearby, looked up with a trembling smile. And you've made me see what love really is. Elliana knelt beside her, holding her hands. Mummy, you're part of this miracle too. You gave me a lesson no school could ever teach. Evelyn wept softly. I wish I could turn back time. Elliana shook her head. No. If you did, maybe I'd never learn how powerful forgiveness can be. A year later, on a bright Sunday morning, the Anderson family gathered again. This time, not in court, not in hospital, but in the garden of their home. The air was full of laughter. Elliana had returned from Switzerland after completing her fellowship. She now ran a foundation called Juliana Hope Initiative, named after her late mother, to provide scholarships for orphans who dreamed of becoming doctors. Children ran across the grass in matching white t-shirts with the foundation's logo. Evelyn sat beneath a mango tree, her hair now silver, watching them with quiet peace. Kingsley sat beside her, his hand resting over hers. When Elliana walked toward them, the children cheered, Dr. Elliana! Dr. Elliana! She smiled, her heart full. You see, Mummy, she said, sitting beside Evelyn. Love always finds its way home. Evelyn smiled faintly. You were the child I never deserved, but God gave you to me anyway. At that moment, a little girl ran up to Elliana, holding two identical dolls. Doctor, you forgot to name them. Their names are Miracle and Mirabelle. Elliana laughed softly. The girl smiled. The children clapped, not knowing the deep meaning behind those names. The same names Elliana once dreamed of giving to her own daughters. Kingsley looked at her proudly. Evelyn closed her eyes, smiling as a tear rolled down her cheek. As the rain fell that night, it washed away more than just the dirt on the streets of Lagos. It had washed away years of pain, guilt, and unforgiveness. In the months that followed Evelyn's recovery, a quiet peace settled over the Anderson home. There were no more angry voices, no more hidden tears, just the sound of healing. The slow kind that rebuilds what hatred once broke. Elliana continued her work at Lagos University Teaching Hospital. Her compassion made her a favorite among patients. Her story, the girl who forgave her poisoner, spread across Nigeria like wildfire. Journalists wrote about her. Churches spoke of her during sermons. To many, she was a living miracle, but even miracles get lonely. Late one evening, after a long shift, Elliana stood by the hospital window, watching the city lights flicker like stars. Her heart ached with a quiet emptiness. She loved saving lives, but sometimes she still longed for the one thing the doctors said she could never have. A child of her own. Some miracles, she whispered to herself, take longer to arrive, She didn't know that her next miracle was just about to walk through the door. It happened one humid afternoon. A man in a neatly pressed navy blue shirt and safety helmet walked into the hospital lobby. He had strong shoulders and a kind smile. His name tag read Jerry Okonkwo, chemical engineer, Petro Lagos International. He approached the reception desk nervously. "Good afternoon. I'm looking for Dr. Elliana Anderson. My company's safety officer recommended her clinic for emergency training." The nurse smiled. "You're lucky. She's on break, just over there." Jerry turned and saw Elliana sitting near the coffee stand, flipping through a patient file. There was something serene about her, the way she smiled politely at strangers, the calmness in her eyes. He walked over, clearing his throat. "Excuse me, doctor. I'm Jerry." She looked up and smiled gently. "Nice to meet you. How can I help?" And that's how it began. A friendship born over spilled coffee and safety manuals. Jerry was fascinated by her courage. She was drawn to his kindness and humility. He never treated her like a tragic story. To him, she wasn't the orphan girl who survived poison. She was simply Elliana, a woman who laughed too softly, cared too deeply, and carried light in her eyes. Weeks turned to months. Coffee turned to dinner. Conversations turned to prayers. One evening, as the sun dipped over the third mainland bridge, Jerry said quietly, "Elliana, you've healed so many people. Isn't it time someone healed you too?" Her heart fluttered. "Jerry, I don't know if I can give you the family you deserve." He smiled gently and held her hands. "I'm not marrying you to have children. I'm marrying you because you're my miracle." Tears rolled down her cheeks. No one had ever said those words to her, and 6 months later, they were married. The wedding day was a sunrise of joy. The church was filled with guests, nurses, engineers, friends, and dignitaries. Soft music floated through the air. Flowers lined the pews, and the air smelled of lilies and hope. Elliana stood at the entrance of the church, dressed in a glowing white lace gown. Her veil shimmered under the light, her face radiant and calm. Her heart raced as she looked ahead at Jerry, waiting at the altar in a sleek black tuxedo, his eyes shining with love. Beside her stood Kingsley Anderson, her adoptive father. He wore a grey agbada with silver embroidery, his eyes wet with tears. He turned to her, smiling through emotion. "My daughter," he whispered. "Today, I give you away, but you'll never stop being my miracle." Elliana smiled. "You gave me life, Daddy. Now I'll live it." The church fell silent as Kingsley held her arm and walked her slowly down the aisle. Every step echoed with memories. The day she had walked into his interview hall in rags, the day he had called her daughter, the night she almost died, and now, the day she was being given away in love. When they reached the altar, Kingsley placed her hand into Jerry's. "Take care of her," he said softly, his voice breaking. "She's heaven's gift to this world." Jerry nodded firmly. "I will, sir. Always." The pastor's voice filled the hall. "What God has joined together, let no one put asunder." And when the vows were done, the cheers rose high. Cameras flashed. Evelyn, now reformed and quietly seated in the front row, wiped her tears and whispered, "Thank you, Lord, for giving her the happiness I once tried to take away." The celebration that followed was filled with laughter, dancing, and tears of joy. But as Elliana and Jerry drove away in their white car decorated with flowers, a single thought lingered in her mind. What if her womb could never carry life? Still, she held on to hope. 2 years later, the house in Lekki was quiet that night. Jerry was reading the newspaper when he heard Eliana's faint voice from the bathroom. "Jerry." He stood quickly. "Ellie? You okay?" She walked out slowly, holding a small plastic stick in her trembling hand. A pregnancy test. Her face was pale, her lips shaking. "Jerry," she whispered, "it's positive." For a moment, he couldn't speak. Then he dropped the paper, ran to her, and hugged her so tightly that she could barely breathe. Tears streamed down his face. "Elliana, it's a miracle. You're pregnant." She cried too, laughing and shaking all at once. "But the doctors said it was impossible." They said. He kissed her forehead. "They're not God." When they told Kingsley, he broke down in tears. "Your mother would be proud, my child. You've proven that faith can rewrite science." 9 months later, the miracle grew. The doctors monitored her carefully, expecting complications, but each scan showed 2 healthy babies. And then, on a bright Sunday morning, Elliana gave birth to twin girls. When the nurse placed the babies in her arms, she sobbed uncontrollably. "Twins," she whispered, "just like the children I used to dream of." Jerry, standing beside her, kissed her forehead. "They're our double portion of grace." Kingsley arrived moments later, tears streaming down his cheeks as he cradled one baby gently. "Miracle," he whispered to the first. Then, looking at the other, "And this one?" "Mirabelle." The names stuck. When the hospital announced the news, it made headlines across the country. Doctor once declared infertile gives birth to twins, a true miracle. Reporters flooded the hospital. People prayed. Others wept. But Elliana didn't care for fame. She only cared for the two tiny hearts beating against hers. Months later, at the dedication ceremony, the church was filled again. Kingsley sat in the front row, proudly holding one twin, while Evelyn, now grey-haired and peaceful, held the other. Jerry stood beside Elliana as the pastor lifted the twins in blessing. "These children are living proof," the pastor said, "that when God writes your story, even the laws of medicine must bow." Elliana looked up at the ceiling, tears glistening in her eyes. "Thank you, God," she whispered. "You turned my pain into purpose, my loss into laughter, my emptiness into abundance." The congregation clapped and sang. Kingsley wept openly, unashamed. Evelyn smiled, whispering, "You see, love always wins." Outside, sunlight poured through the stained glass windows, bathing the family in golden light. In that moment, surrounded by her husband, her father, her redeemed mother, and her twin daughters, Elliana finally understood the lesson of her life. When forgiveness births love, love births miracles. And as the choir sang softly, "Great is thy faithfulness," Elliana held Miracle and Mirabelle close, whispering with a trembling smile, "I was the girl who begged for a chance. Now I'm the woman who carries two miracles in her arms." What is your view about this story? Where are you watching from? If you enjoyed this story, comment, share, and subscribe to our channel for more interesting stories.